Good morning. It is Wednesday, August 4th. I am independent journalist Georgia Fort in for Ben Dixon. This morning, it's important for us to have a conversation as parents are beginning to feel like they have no other choice but then to send their children back to school. It's fall in some states. We know that schools are already beginning to resume, and up north, school will resume next month. So what are your options when you know that your children are going to be in classrooms filled with other kids who haven't been vaccinated? What does that mean for your family's health? What does that mean for the pandemic? And truly, are there any other options? That brings us to our guest this morning, Anthony Galloway, Dr. Mack, and Adrian Ashby. Adrian, I want to begin with you because this is your first time on the show, and also because you have been homeschooling your children for nearly a decade, correct?
Yes, that's right. We started in 2012, and this will be our 10th year homeschooling.
And I know for some parents that might feel intimidating, taking that on. Could you just, for those who have never tried to homeschool but are finding themselves kind of like in a rock and a hard place and really don't want to send their kids back, can you just share with them how you and your husband arrived at the decision to homeschool and how you guys have found so much success in doing so?
Absolutely. Well, thank you, Georgia. We started homeschooling in 2012, but honestly, I researched it probably 4 years before that, just because that's the type of person that I am. I needed to convince myself that this was doable. And so the main reason I started was that I'd met some homeschoolers when we lived in the Atlanta area. I met homeschooling families, and I just really thought that their kids were great. Their kids got along with my kids. And my oldest is a boy, and he was, I think, in kindergarten at the time. And I was concerned about the plight of Black boys in public schools. And I wanted to try to figure out what other options he might have or we might have for his education. And so that was the reason that we started this whole thing. I started researching. And ultimately, when we moved back to Virginia in 2012, I was able to start homeschooling when my oldest by that time was in 5th grade, and then my middle child was in 3rd grade, and my youngest, I think, was 3 or 4 at that time. So he was actually still going to preschool.
And you have since, raised your kids. You guys have done homeschooling. They are now off to college. Can you share with us some of the achievements that they've made that you're most proud of?
Sure. The biggest achievement, I think, is that I feel like my son, who graduated in 2020, went out into the world. So our mission for our homeschool, our mission statement is to develop young adults who love God and their neighbor and who are prepared to engage the world with compassion, creativity, and critical insight. So that's what we're trying to do here in our homeschool. And so I feel like we launched our first kid off, and I feel like he had those qualities: compassion, creativity, and critical insight. He actually got an appointment to the United States Coast Guard Academy. So we just dropped him off on June 28th. We dropped him off at the U.S. Coast Guard Academy in New London, Connecticut. He applied to 11 colleges, and he got into 9 of them. So a lot of people would call that success, and it is success of a type. It lets us know that his education didn't suffer by homeschooling. But the things that I think people don't see is that he's the kid that we get reports back saying, Solomon really helped out his classmates. He took the lead when something needed, to be done. All of those things. That was part of what we were trying to build here while we were homeschooling.
Now, Adrian, as your children were advancing, let's say you started 5th, 6th grade, at what point did you know that they had passed or mastered the requirements to move from one grade to another? And then ultimately, when it came to college, did they SAT, ACT? So just tell us, how did you all understand the mastery of moving from one grade to the next? And then even how you developed the curriculum, or did you find the curriculum somewhere?
So in Virginia, and each state differs. Each state has its own homeschooling laws. In Virginia, we're required to test our children or have them evaluated by a licensed teacher every year. So for my kids, I always gave them every year the Iowa test of basic skills, which I know some people probably remember from when they were in school, which is a nationally normed standardized test. And so I would give them that test at the end of the year, get the results back and send that into the school district. And we would get the results back and see, they would break down for math and language arts, what percentile your children were in, so compare it to the national, all the kids who took the test at that time, what percentile they were in. So that gave us good feedback. And it also gave us language to speak with people who may not understand homeschooling. Most people understand standardized test results. When it came to college admission, what we did, so when you homeschool, you're sort of the guidance counselor, you're the principal, you're the teacher, you're the lunch lady, you're the whole thing. And so in preparing for my son to go to college, we did the PSAT just as people do. We did the PSAT, we had him sit for the SAT, and I had to keep records of every course that we taught at home and keep detailed descriptions of that course, because unlike people who go to school, with homeschoolers, if I say I taught my child Algebra 1, they want to see a description of the course. The colleges, they want to see the title of the book that we used or any resources that we used. So I had probably about a 12-page course description, like you would see in colleges. This course will teach these things, and a transcript. And so we had to create that. I have one now for my daughter who's 17. So we're in the process. She's going to be applying to colleges in the fall. So we're in the process of keeping those. And I hired another homeschool mom, Black homeschool mom, who specializes in college counseling for homeschoolers. So she was able to take all of the information that I gleaned over the years about my son and turn it into something that colleges understand. So by the time it was time for college admissions, we had a nice packet that we could submit to colleges in a way that they understood it.
Now, I feel like for some people, this might, feel really intimidating. And Anthony, I'd love to hear from you on this. When you think about going back to school, right, there's this concern of children not being vaccinated and what that means for our kids, what that means for our communities, and what that means for us as parents. There are so many parents out here who are busy juggling their careers and can't imagine taking this type of burden on, but are also now looking at, oh my goodness, I don't want my kids to go to school either. And what you've shared with us, Adrian, is maybe it's not a burden at all. Maybe this is something that would really produce dividends, not only for our children's futures, but for us as well. Anthony, you as a father who, you're facing the same decision, what is this bringing up for you?
Well, also as a father and as a minister, one of the things that I'm finding is that more people are making this choice, and that people have been making this choice for a long time. I think, Sister Adrian, one of the things that you've just done excellently is debunk some of the myths that folks have out there about homeschooling. Myths that homeschool kids are less prepared. They don't stay on track with their public school or private school counterparts. They don't go to college. None of those things are true. In fact, we see pretty much the opposite of that, and so as a father, for us, this is a serious option that we're thinking about because our kids are younger than the vaccination age. They're both under 12. And so, and they did not enjoy last year's online schooling as much as everybody was trying to make happen, did not work for them. And so we would much rather follow the direction of some of our friends and colleagues, and about 20% of the Center for the African Diaspora that I run, 20% of the parents in that program at that center are homeschool, and they use our center for the companion enrichment. So it's a serious option that we're really considering for this year, at least for the portion of the year before they can get vaccinated, at least. The other piece of that is in here in the state of Minnesota where we live, there's a whole lot of resources. In fact, there's a whole department of homeschool in our Department of Education. So another myth that Sister Adrienne, I'm so glad that you debunked, is that somehow when you homeschool that there is no connection with other school entities. And here, at least in the state of Minnesota, that's just not true. And so, I think it's not only a viable option for many of the families in my circle, it's the only option and the best option. The only other thing that I'll add to that is one of the things that we've seen alleviated with our students, not necessarily, particularly students of color, in particular Black and Indigenous students here in Minnesota, is that a lot of the other situations that our students find in school racially were not experienced this past year. And I've seen a huge benefit to my children's mental health, not having to navigate a school where, in addition to all of the excellence that they want to strive for, they also have to deal with the racialized incidents that are happening at their school as well. So there's just so many checkboxes being marked on our direction towards homeschooling.
So Brother Anthony and Sister Adrienne, and I'm with Georgia, Adrienne, as you were describing what you were doing, I'm like, my Lord, I'm a mechanical engineer and I just don't think that I could have dealt with that. So in going through all that you went through, are there financial resources? I know for kids that go to public schools, there's so much money that's allocated per school. Given that states are recognizing homeschools, are there financial resources to help you all as parents if a parent elects to go down the route of homeschooling?
In the state of Virginia, there are not, but I know at least one state, that state is Alaska, where I think families get $1,500 a year that they can use toward homeschooling, and that can include extracurriculars, dance classes, art classes. It can include curriculum. One thing I will say, when the COVID pandemic happened in 2020, a lot of Black parents started thinking about this homeschooling thing. And so in various Facebook groups I was in, people were passing my name around. I think I was contacted by no less than 30 Black parents who were seeking information about how to homeschool their children last summer. And what I always told them was that really homeschooling is just a part of our lives. Like, from the time your kids are born, you're actually educating them as you walk along the way. Like, you're not saying, okay, we're going to talk about math, but you're cooking and you're saying, look, I'm taking 1/4 teaspoon of this and 1/4 teaspoon of that. That's math, even though it doesn't sound like it is, even though they're not sitting at a desk. So I would tell people, and we had lots of people contact me who were full-time, both parents working full-time and trying to figure out how they could do it. But because everyone was home because of the pandemic, people really didn't have a choice. And so their question was, do I do the online thing that the school is offering, or do I figure out a way to make the learning come alive more with homeschooling? And so that's what I started getting in the habit of walking people through. And I would ease their minds by saying, start out with just language arts and math. Don't worry about bringing in all of the other things. Just start out really slowly. But even before you start out with all the academics, start getting to know your child. Figuring out what makes that child tick. Because when our kids are away from us for 8 hours a day, that's time we're not figuring out who they are. They're not getting to figure out who we are. And so take some time to get to know your kids. COVID really taught us that there is no rush for all of this, right? If your kid has to take their time through a math subject, let them. That's what homeschooling allows them. They're not competing against the person next to them to make sure that they finish the assignment as fast. They're learning at their own pace.
Okay, and to both of you, let's say you're struggling with a certain subject as a parent, math, science, chemistry, whatever it is. What did you do in the cases of subjects that you didn't feel you had a mastery of, yet you're now trying to teach this particular course?
Go ahead.
Oh, I was just going to say as the kids got older, we had them test into community college. So my oldest son did several math, starting with pre-calculus at community college. He did his physics at community college. For the younger kids, let's just say if I wasn't really interested, like art has never been my strong suit at home. We joined a co-op, a homeschool co-op, which is basically a collective of parents who get together and say, you know what? for example, I taught U.S. government. I'm an attorney, so I taught U.S. government at that co-op. But another mom who's a math specialist taught my son math, and another mom taught French. And so it's sort of a pooling of resources that went on so that the kids are still getting what they want, and they're getting taught by someone who loves the subject. And I'm not having to do it. I'm just sort of in the background coaching that part. Go ahead, Anthony.
Nice.
Sorry about that.
Well, I was just gonna co-sign you because with the center that I run, one of the things that we do is we coordinate pods, and so it was easy actually in the transition to the online learning because we already had these pods that were already set up, and so during the day we open up our center, and there are folks who use the center to do the co-op work that you just described, in addition to just meeting up. And what I also found really interesting about that, not just the community college plug you just made. Here in Minnesota, we have quite a bit of community colleges, and so that just works. But we also have a robust PSEO, post-secondary education options process here in Minnesota as well. And we find a huge number of homeschool kids take advantage of that. But the other piece that comes along with that, to your question, Dr. Mack, is how many teachers that we actually find in the cohorts themselves. So folks either who have taught for a while. We also have folks, aunts and uncles and things like that, who had been teachers, who may have retired, who can drop in for one class because they miss it so much. There's a plethora of resources that I just, through the parents who are utilizing these pods at our center, finding that this resource was there. I would also add, and I think you alluded to this a little bit, being in there, just coaching in the background. There is also this nexus of parents getting to talk to each other about so many other issues and things like that were coming up. It was actually a very much a cooperative model, not just from the education side, but also to the mental health. There are parents in there who were psychologists. There are parents who were youth specialists and developers. And so they were able to put together these opportunities that, quite frankly, I was a little jealous of, because my kids were going to full-time school when I first learned about these pods. And then we were able to access them when we were online, to the point where our kids actually enjoyed that part. And whenever time came for the online portion with school, we'd see that tank. We'd see their energy tank. We'd see their will tank and all of those things. And so mommy math class was so much more enjoyable than the one online.
Love it. And Adrian, I'm curious to know from you, because you started homeschooling well before the pandemic. So this wasn't something that you just stumbled into as a result of this pandemic. This is something that your family chose to do many, many, many years before it. For those who are walking into this and they're trying to figure it out, do you have any advice on how to also keep your home safe while you're homeschooling? Because there still is a pandemic that's going on. Were there measures that you guys put in place as you were homeschooling to keep yourself and the kids safe, if there were anyone else in the house that was leaving out to go to work, or if you're having guest teachers who are coming in? How do you deal with COVID while you're homeschooling?
Well, once COVID happened, all of our co-ops stopped. The co-ops went virtual, just like a lot of schools did. And so we were home. The good news for us is that we've been doing this for all these years. So we knew the drill of what to do. So the kids and I were not going out of the house. Really, my husband was the only person who was going out of the house, and he was making sure, that he masked and he washed up when he came home and all of those things. The thing about COVID, so most homeschoolers, a lot of people worry about, if they homeschool their child, will their child have enough opportunities to socialize with other people, right? What people don't know is that homeschoolers are constantly socializing with other people, to the point where when COVID happened, we were like, wait a minute, we can't go to the park, we can't go to the museum, we can't meet up with it was like all the things that we spend all our time out of the house doing, we couldn't do. And so I think that part was challenging for us. So a lot of that stuff moved online. And so we were able to sort of keep the kids safe, keep the kids home. And if there was some socializing that took place, it would be outside.
Okay, and so even with that, was there a requirement, now that COVID hit, was there a requirement amongst the co-op parents to say, we have to get our children vaccinated, or was that a personal choice? How did you all deal with that aspect of it?
So we're starting a co-op. We're in the process of starting a Black-led co-op now. We're open in late August. It's called Kindred Homeschool Collective. Me and 3 other moms got together and said, we've had our children in co-ops in where we were the only Black family in most of the co-ops, and now we think we want something different for our children. So we're having to really think deeply about how do we make this thing happen for our kids, given the Delta variant and all of those things. And so we're actually in active meetings about that, creating our own COVID policy with regard to masking and social distancing. We're blessed in our community to have a nurse who's one of the moms in our co-op and a woman, a public health specialist in our co-op. So along with them, we're formulating our plan to, so that the kids can have the opportunity to meet each other and learn from these awesome classes and not have to, and also for the parents. Honestly, it's really about us parents getting together, as Anthony was saying, and talking amongst ourselves and sharing informal mentorship opportunities.
Beautiful.
And Anthony, let me ask this question, Anthony. When I think of homeschool, my mind is so antiquated of just thinking, mom or dad is there in the house, in the home, and they're just drilling this into the child. The child never leaves the house. They're just being subjected to schooling this whole time. So under this new homeschooling concept, how is social interacting integrated into the homeschooling aspect of your child's education?
So I can only speak to this from being a center who's been involved in some of the enrichment portions of this. But when we, I just want to double down on something that Sister Adrienne said earlier around the socialization side. It is a complete fallacy. It's a myth that homeschool children are less socialized or are more socially awkward. It doesn't pan out in any real research, even though anecdotally you may hear it from some educators. I'm sorry, that's just not the case. When kids come to us at the Center for the African Diaspora, they're not any less socialized. Actually, what we find is that the more intricate socialized skills, the deeper ones that actually matter long term, we actually see the homeschool population of the kids who come to our center excelling. They're the mediators. They're the folks who get the deeper social emotional pieces that are there. So I need to underscore that. So we just don't see that assumption there. In terms of the quote unquote drill and kill, again, we see this as a practice more indicative of public school education than we do in the homeschool side. It just doesn't pan out, at least for the kids who come through the center and in our particularly our Black homeschool networks here in Minnesota. Folks stay together, they know each other, they connect across and are continuing. There's blackhomeschoolminnesota.com is a resource guide for Black families here in our space. And so I just want to push around that socialization myth that somehow only by sticking kids together in a school in a rigid schedule from 8 a.m. to 3 p.m. is the only way that kids gain socialization skills. If that were the case, then folks in many schools wouldn't be paying so much money to try to train around social emotional learning help. And guess what? A whole lot of the homeschool folks and kids and parents can speak to that very easily. So I think that's an important thing to think about as well. The other piece that we have here is we have a strong park system. Sister Adrienne, I heard you talk about that park system. We have one of the strongest park systems in the nation here in Minnesota. And one of the things that you will find very often is homeschool networks, pods, cohorts, however, folks I identify with them, making use of that in ways that is pretty extraordinary. So I can walk here in the state of Minnesota. I can, and I've seen this happen. I've been a part of these groups. We have a site called the Bedote. It's the sacred origin site of the Dakota peoples, the Native American peoples here in Minnesota. It's also the site for the concentration camp that was there. It's also the site of Fort Snelling, the first big fort in the state of Minnesota. It's also the site where the first Black flotilla of refugees came to Minnesota for community establishment, right? And so I'm sitting there with a group of pastors planning an international prayer service that's going to happen in a few years. And there's a homeschooling cohort pot of groups that are coming through, and we stopped and just listened, because as this group was coming through, I'm watching homeschool parents teach about the history that folks are fighting to get taught in our schools. So, there are so many things that happen in the homeschool spaces that we often will hold on to myths about, from socialization to what's actually covered. And I think, Sister Adrienne, you're doing an excellent job debunking some of those myths. The only other piece that I'll add real quickly is just that one of the things that we're thinking about is both myself and my wife have the ability, and I have this wondering for you, Sister Adrienne, about how work happens in this, because I think one of the other myths is that it takes one parent staying at home completely to do this. And we found, because we had the ability to work from home, that we just made a schedule, mapped out a schedule, and that was how we made that work. And we still were able to stay full time, especially now that more and more companies and offices are allowing folks to work from home. I'm wondering how that worked for you, because I've seen many creative ways that happened in the cohorts that I've seen.
Well, I work, so I still practice law. I work from home, so I practice law about 20 hours a week. One thing that people don't realize about homeschooling is that homeschooling does not take the long amount of time that a school day does, right? So people's kids are in school from 8 to 3 or something like that, and they're thinking, oh my goodness, if I homeschool, I need 7 hours worth of time in order to educate my child. That's just not true. There's a lot of time in school that is spent in non-educational time, right? We think about all the things that we did in school that were not time learning. So what I do to make it work, I get up early in the morning, as probably a lot of parents do. I get some time in with my work then. And then once my kids are up, we sort of have a relaxed schedule around here. Once my kids are up, we have our morning meeting. That's when we sit around the table. We talk, we sing, we read poetry, we pray, all that stuff. And then we talk about what's going to happen for the day. And then I'll work with them in their one-on-one things, especially for about the 12-year-old, maybe 2 or 3 hours, literally worth of work is probably a whole school day or more worth for a public school student. And then I usually spend the afternoons doing my work. And the kids at that time can be doing their individual subjects. They can be reading, doing some type of art. My youngest son is very into growing things now, growing plants and all of that stuff. Any of that. Because what I'm trying to do is I'm trying to create independent learners, kids that leave this house and continue learning for their whole life, lifelong learners, right? Yes. Once you leave school, you no longer have teachers. You sort of got to seek out for yourself how to learn things. And the sooner I feel like a kid learns how to find information and teach themselves, the better off they are.
Well, Adrienne, I have some experience with the academies and I've been to the Coast Guard Academy in New London, right there on the Thames River. As a matter of fact, I was on one of the Coast Guard Academy's sailboats when Commandant Papp was the commandant of the Coast Guard. But, and I really want to highlight the fact that your son got into the Coast Guard Academy, because that education is somewhere around north of $350,000, of which, if I'm not mistaken, you won't have to pay 1 penny for that education. Is that correct?
That's right. Yes. He has to do 5 years in the Coast Guard after he graduates. But yes, we do not have to pay that.
Congratulations.
Well, and what I was going to say is that Ben Dixon has been watching, and he said he's been very intrigued by all of the information that you've shared and would love to plug in, because shout out to his wife, Jada, who has been homeschooling their children and doing an amazing job. But Adrienne, as you pointed out, it really does take that collective and that cooperative. So I hope that those of you who have been watching from home, what you take away from this conversation, if you're a parent, is that you have options, that you don't have to feel pressured into sending your kids back to school and dealing with all of the vaccinations. And I think that this is the perfect time. You guys know that we're on the clock, and my kids are waking up. So we're going to head out. But if you're watching, stick around for more on the Benjamin Dixon Show. I believe Noah Changa is filling in again today. You guys have a wonderful day. Thanks for joining us.
Good morning, everybody. Welcome again to the Benjamin Dixon Show. Y'all on the clock. Georgia Fort, good morning to you. Got more coming up. Noah Changa is here again this morning, y'all. She's coming up next. Y'all stay tuned. Good morning, y'all. Makes me wanna dance so hard. Don't make me remember everything you did. I don't wanna hurt inside. Feel it. Good morning, everybody. Good morning. And it feels so good inside. And I always wanna feel like this. I close my eyes and all my troubles fade away. Your words once got so deep into me. But tonight I won't let that out. Courtney SLP, good morning. Happy Wednesday to you too. Lee, good morning. Paul Perez, Marjorie Lemons, good morning. Laura Strada, good morning. Nat, hey, Sister Nat, what's going on, Sister Nat? Bionic Chronic. Okay, Bionic Chronic, I'm here for it. Miss Nuru, good morning. Brother Lateef, Esther, Ear Hustler, good morning, y'all. Carly Wynn, good morning. Shout out, Brother Tiger. I see you, Tiger. Good morning. I'm done with the hurt inside. Feel it in my body. Feel it in my feet. And it feels so good inside. And I always want to feel like this. Annie Mac, good morning. Mama, good morning, Mama. Love you. Good morning, Mama and Daddy. Bernie Hart, good morning. Love you too. Paul Perez, my first you welcome. Six Dragon Daddy, good morning. Marjorie Lemons, thank you for your super chat. Good morning. Sophia, good morning. Marquez, good morning. Sonny Wright, good morning, y'all. Exactly. Thank you, Noah. Right. Seven Sweetheart, good morning. Barbara, good morning, y'all. When I get you back, oh yeah. All right, cool. When I get you back, oh yeah. When I get you back, oh yeah. I promise you'll never. Shout out Chuck Diesel. When it comes to hardest working moderator in the chat room right now on YouTube. Good morning, Chuck Diesel. Jam Tune, good morning to you on Twitch. All right, y'all, we're gonna go ahead and get started. So welcome to the screen, my sister from another Mr. Noah Changa. Good morning, Noah.
Good morning. Oh my gosh, I'm back again. Good morning, y'all. Thanks so much for having me back. It's really good to be here on this Wednesday morning. It's a wee early. I work evenings, so I like to sleep in. But you know what? Anything for the morning crew over here. So it's been like a wild few days already. I mean, we're only halfway through the week. We have a governor with confirmed accusations of sexual assault or harassment. We got the awesome Cori Bush doing the damn thing on the Capitol steps. And we have the, unfortunate turnout last night in Ohio's 11th congressional district. district. And we're going to talk about all those things in the next 30 and more later on this morning, because I'm sticking around to hang out with Rebecca. Rebecca is my sweetheart and I love her. And we've never done a show together before. I've helped Rebecca prep for shows. She's helped me, but we've never done one together. So I'm really excited to see how this goes. So y'all bear with us. But first, real quickly, before we talk about, what happened in Ohio, I wanted to just touch on what happened with Governor Cuomo yesterday from the state of New York. There is this issue of him and the sexual harassment allegations has been in the news since around about after the 2020 election, right? Like around about December or so was when the first allegations, I think, came to the surface, were made public. And then it took a while for an independent investigation to actually start because he obstructed the process, right? Like he didn't want it to be independent. He wanted to give it to one of the judges that was like cool with him first, right? He wanted one of his people to investigate for him. And there were some concerns. Some people try to say that Letitia James, who is the AG, would not be able to do an impartial job, despite doing her job in multiple instances, just because of some of the relationships she's previously had with the governor in terms of him fundraising and supporting her, et cetera. Well, Sis did what she has been continuously doing since she became AG. She did her job and did it well. She appointed, deputies who led the investigation to outside counsel, and they came back with 168-page report that documents not just multiple instances of numerous degrees of unwanted sexual behavior from the governor to multiple current and former staff persons, including a state trooper, I believe that may have been assigned to his security detail. I might be a little fuzzy there, but one involved a state trooper as well. But also it's an indictment of the office and the way in which he ran his office, which created a culture that allowed the harassment to persist between 2013 and 2020, but also created fear and a culture of fear and intimidation. There's one instance, at least one, of retaliatory action against one of the women. It's a total of 11 women that have been documented. And it's, calls for him to resign, and he's being very defiant. And I think, David, I think we might have some footage real quickly from some comments that he made yesterday in response.
I cooperated with the review, and I can now finally share the truth. My attorney, who is a non-political former federal prosecutor, has done a response to each allegation, and the facts are much different than what has been portrayed. That document is available on my website. If you are interested, please take the time to read the facts and decide for yourself. First, I want you to know directly from me that I never touched anyone inappropriately or made inappropriate sexual advances. I am 63 years old. I've lived my entire adult life in public view. That is just not who I am, and that's not who I have ever been. I do kiss people on the forehead. I do kiss people on the cheek. I do kiss people on the hand. I do embrace people. I do hug people, men and women. I do on occasion say, ciao Bella. On occasion, I do slip and say sweetheart or darling or honey. I do banter with people. I do tell jokes, some better than others. I am the same person in public as I am in private. You have seen me do it on TV.
Yeah. So saved y'all the rest of the BS coming from the current and hopefully soon to be former governor. I mean, really, he should save the New York residents time and money and not have to worry about making the state legislator impeach him. But maybe that's what his ego needs. I mean, all this stuff, like, these are the facts. Again, outside independent appointed counsel. investigate. They talked to, I believe it was 179 different people. There's corroborating evidence, there's text messages, there's pictures, there's documentation. I think it was 74,000 pages of evidence that was looked through. So he could dig in his heels and give his Trump-like speech. He could show pictures of people he's kissed and hugged in public and other people kissing and hug other people. There's a thing, right? When you're friends with someone, and if we are in non-COVID times and I see you and I'm like, oh my God, girl, and we hug and we kiss and we recognize that's how we greet each other, that's one thing. But if you're making lewd jokes at people, if you're kissing and hugging on them and they're obviously uncomfortable, but you're also their boss, right? And not only is he their boss, he is literally the most powerful person in the entire state of New York. So it's not just that, oh, I'm Italian, this is my culture. He really leads into the stereotype of what it is to be a powerful Italian person and runs, the state of New York. I think someone said he was Tony Soprano, right? He really does have a mob boss mentality with the way in which he does and engages. And can you imagine what it does? So he, and his part of his whole little spiel thing, he has this whole thing that he put out with him with all these powerful people, right? And I forget who was saying this, first, I try to always source people when I learn stuff from them. I try not to just bite people's ideas as my own, but I'm forgetting who said this first. But someone was saying that, that's an intimidation tactic in itself. See, I'm powerful. I have all these powerful friends. You cross me, you're done. That's the type of message it sends when you show pictures of him hugging Charlie Rangel, hugging all these, celebrities and powerful political people. But we need to send the message. It doesn't matter what party you're from. People can be oh, but Trump has never been held accountable. Well, I can't do nothing about the fact that Trump has not been held accountable. People tried. Just because people haven't held him accountable doesn't mean that Andrew Cuomo cannot get his right now. He most definitely deserves it. Not just for this, for trying to have folks who are incarcerated make low wage or no wage hand sanitizer earlier in the pandemic, his poor handling of issues around the pandemic and, elderly homes. And there's just so much wrong with Cuomo beyond this, the way he's blocked certain pieces of, positive legislation for the state. Cuomo needs to go. Cuomo needed to go when girl from Sex and the City, Cynthia, was running against him for governor. Cuomo needs to go. So that's all I got to say about Cuomo. But I really felt like we couldn't start this morning and act like, literally one of the most powerful politicians, Democratic politicians in the country did not just get definitely, it's a definitive finding. And Letitia James, who is a New York AG, she said it. She was like, look, he violated federal law. It's very clear he violated federal law. He violated state law. There's possible criminal stuff here, but now her jurisdiction is civil. It is up to anyone else. So all the new DAs running or the current DAs that exist is up to any of them if they choose to pursue criminal charges against the governor for any of these accounts. But one thing is very clear by many admissions. You even have President Biden weighing in and saying that he needs to step down. Now, President Biden and all the hugging and stuff, that's a whole different conversation that I personally don't wade into, but y'all can do with that what you want. The other thing that was actually really awesome that happened yesterday was the announcement that after about 4 or 5 days of sleeping on the Capitol steps, Cori Bush's amazing protests absolutely paid off, at least in the interim. The CDC announced yesterday late in the afternoon that it would issue a new 60-day moratorium. So it's not quite an extension of the original one. They changed while the original moratorium covered the entire country, the language limits this one. It's 60 days, so it'll go through October 3rd. And it limits this one to, I think the language is counties with a substantial or high incidence of COVID infections, right? So looking at the rising Delta variant and the increase in infections and hospitalizations. So even though that limits it to particular counties, apparently from some of the data that people are looking at, that could potentially cover still 90% of the population in the country. So they've narrowed the scope some, but it still covers a larger portion of the population. But as we talked about, I think on Monday when I was here, this is just a stopgap. This does not actually resolve the issue. This helps keep some people in their homes who may be facing eviction right now. We still need the states and local, entities to release the aid that is that's just sitting there. I mean, there's a bulk of billions of dollars that is sitting out there that can go to both renters and, landlords that may qualify. There are other provisions. I mean, I think also there was a report that just came out from the Center for Budget and I'm doing bad with acronyms this morning. I apologize. There's just so much buzzing in my head. But, one of the DC think tanks just came out with a study that showed that 1 in 4 families that are eligible to receive housing aid, housing assistance, like through rental assistance, through Section 8 vouchers and the
Millions
like.
Of American renters.
Only 25% of those actually get what they need. So we have 75% of families, which many of them are, women households. They're Black and brown families that we're talking about too, are not receiving the need and aid. So there is a severe underfunding already of housing aid in the country. So we want to talk about making sure we can help people stay in their homes, afford to live in their homes, because so many people are getting priced out of, communities all across the country. It's not just big cities up north. It's happening in the South too, to people. It's happening, unfortunately, in some more, rural to urban mixed areas. These are things that are on the table and need real serious solutions now, not on October 2nd when the next moratorium. So hopefully, the House is still chilling on its 7-week vacation. Who gets to take a 7-week vacation? I have literally probably barely ever had a 1-week vacation, like a solid 1 week in my life. That was not my main job. But, so many of us still have other work that we do too. So, but who gets to take off 7 whole weeks? Like, that's insane. It's wild. It's wild. It's wild. Sorry, correcting the language. It's wild. But anyway, so hopefully when they come back from their very long break, they will be back and ready to actually tackle this housing issue. And we'll actually see a better solution, because unfortunately, there was news this morning of the Delta Plus variant. Like, we got more variants than Loki, y'all. Like, the Delta Plus variant is now present in South Korea, and who knows how long that happens before we're now dealing with Delta Plus. It's like Delta Force. Like, it's just like Delta keeps leveling, COVID keeps leveling up, and we're not quite ready to combat it yet. So yeah, I mean, but just kudos to Cori Bush and so many others who did go out there and join her. I mean, even, you had more mainstream Dems like, the head of the Rules Committee, Jim McGovern, go out there on Saturday. Both Senator Elizabeth Warren and Senator Bernie Sanders went out there. I mean, there are quite a few representatives who did finally, come out there and recognize the value of what Cori was doing and what she was saying and leading. And so, but that's who Cori is. Like, when you go back to 2016, when Cori was a nurse working full time and trying to run for Senate, then against Jason Kander, who was at the time the Secretary of State. And then in 2018, when she was deciding whether to run against Claire McCaskill, whether to make another Senate run or whether to run for Congress in the Missouri one, like she did, she kept pushing. And then in 2020, it tipped. She finally did it. She finally won a seat, and she literally never gave up. I remember one of Bernie's African outreach directors. You all have familiar with Marcus Farrell. Another amazing woman who worked on that team was Michelle, and Michelle and I sat on. She's from Missouri, also. We sat on the phone with Cori in 2018, or ahead of 2018, for about 3.5 hours, talking about whether she should run for Senate and Congress and how to make these decisions and what would it look like to try to run again. What could she do differently and things of that nature. So that strategic work is an ongoing thing, but it's also, we have to keep pushing because we do need bold people, right? Like what Cori did, Cori flipped a seat that was a democratically held seat. It wasn't like it was a red to blue seat. People act like those are the only flips that matter. But having that bold leadership in Congress is absolutely necessary, because it's that bold leadership. It's being willing to take a stand and make demands within your own house, within your own party, within your own coalition, that helps move the needle when people are like, oh, this is just the way it is. We're going on vacation. So I say all that to say that we saw what happened in Ohio, last night with the special election, and polls were showing, Nina with a strong lead, even though it tightened at some points. But my thing is that polls don't vote. It's something that I've always said. I think it's something that Sister Turner has said herself in the past. But polls don't vote, people do. And in a special election, it is very tight. It is very difficult to get folks to understand, one, we just voted, why are we voting again? And I'm going to have to vote again next year. Like, that fatigue that our communities have has to do with, we need to shift the way we view and value voting and civic engagement. But we also have to make the case for why does it matter for people to show up in a Dem primary and actually make that choice, particularly when the primary is often the general in these types of elections. I think Brother Carl is here this morning joining us again. I mean, Brother Carl is always here, but I think he's on right now. So I'd love to bring him into the conversation to hear more about just some of his reflections, just looking at the results from last night.
Well, Sister Noah, first of all, good morning to you. And second
good morning.
What an absolute plethora of information that you've given us. So let me go back to the beginning with the governor. You made the statement about cleaning up one's own house. So in regards to the governor, being that not only is he the most powerful man in New York, but he comes from one of the most powerful families in the history of New York. So how are the multitude of Democrats taking I had no idea it was 74,000 pages that comprised this investigation. But given the depth of this investigation and the fact that it was an independent investigation, unlike the way that the Republicans dealt with Trump and just completely turned a blind eye to all of his nonsense and his shenanigans, how are the Democrats within the state of New York digesting and dealing with the investigation that recently dropped on the governor?
I mean, just from some of the statements that I've been seeing, I think the Senate Majority Leader, it might have been, came up with a statement saying that, the evidence is overwhelming and it needs to be in the best interest of the state for him to step down. This other quote, this was a real good quote, real quickly. The governor is not civically minded. He is not responsible with his office. He has demonstrated not merely an unfitness for power, but a personal moral vacuity and unwillingness to think of other people, of women, as equals or to imagine his own actions having consequences. And I think that sums up the feeling from what I was seeing different elected officials, different folks from New York, voters in New York, just really weighing in. But there were several who called for him to step down when the allegations were first made earlier this year. And now with this full report, I mean, A.G. James laid it out too. And one of the things she suggested as next steps was he resign. So, yeah.
I'll tell you another thing that's going to be quite interesting is his brother, Chris, who's on CNN. And Chris is known to be a bulldog on issues that are just not right. Certainly when it came to negative 45, he spared no passion for going after the nonsense that was Donald Trump. It's going to be incredibly interesting and as to what his take is going to be on his own brother. I would hate to be in that position of being a host on CNN, having a reputation of speaking truth to power. And now you have to, what is it that you're going to say against your own brother? So do you know of any statement that his brother has made? I wouldn't be surprised if all of a sudden he's off, taking a vacation for a week or so off of CNN.
Well, he might need some legal counsel himself or something, because people are actually calling for his resignation from CNN or his firing by CNN, because apparently, I mean, and it's understandable that he would do this when you think about just how family operates, right? If I have like the communications background and one of my siblings needed help with a press release, I would probably help them. I don't know if I would be helping them with a press release if they were trying to get over on, violating people. That's a different story. But part of what has come out is that Chris Cuomo actually helped with drafting, I think, one of the early statements that the governor had around these allegations, and helped him figure out some of the language to try to explain away one of the allegations, I believe. this has come out. And so folks are really having a problem because, like you just said, with what his reputation is, this is just kind of jarring between, who he purports to be and has been in so much of his coverage. But then when it comes to his brother, this instance. So it's going to be interesting to see, like you were saying, like how he publicly addresses it, but also if the network does anything in lieu of his mention in relation to this investigation as well.
Yeah. And the other thing I want people to think about is this. I remember when I started my engineering career in 1987 and not understanding the pressure or the insults that were happening with women in the workplace, because I can remember when I started my career and tried to imagine this, that you could walk inside an office building and there were pin-up calendars of scantily dressed women on engineers' walls. It was just unbelievable. And so I can remember when they started bringing into diversity training. And I did remember like it was yesterday that when I walked in and I was at a field office and I walked in and met the receptionist, I said, "Good morning, sweetheart." Somebody heard me say that, and I was new on the job, maybe not even a week on the job when I came in and said this. Somebody pulled me aside and said, "Carl, none of those statements." And I go, "But I didn't mean anything." They said, "It's not about what you meant. It's her perception of what you said." So, again, that was in 87 with me. This is the most powerful man in the state of New York. To say that he does not understand unwanted touch is absolutely insane to do that. And so that's my statement on that. But now on the eviction notices. So did I hear you correctly that said that the CDC extended the time that folks can stay inside their homes? Was that the CDC?
So the CDC yesterday, late afternoon, issued a new 60-day moratorium through October 3rd. And part of it is because of the public health concern of having people with the rising Delta, and which is why they tailored it to counties that are having substantial or high infection rates or hospitalizations. I forget the exact language, but they tailored it more to being in line with, concerns around people possibly being in shelters or, in housing with other family members in the middle of the pandemic's rise or
so what's COVID's rise. What's confusing to me is I thought that the original eviction or the stay was granted by Congress, and then it was upheld by the U.S. Supreme Court. So are you saying that?
No, so the original one was by the CDC. So both have been by the CDC.
Okay, so
they were calling on Congress. They were calling on Congress to take actual action. And so that's been the whole back and forth. But the original one was by the CDC and the new one is by the CDC, given that it has the broad grant of authority, or it's interpreted that it has a broad grant of authority because of the pandemic in a matter of public health.
Okay, so just so that we're clear, it was the CDC that established the first moratorium around eviction notices.
Yep.
And when it was set to expire on July 31st, the U.S. Supreme Court upheld the original moratorium set by the CDC, and it was stated that the only way that could be changed is if Congress took action. And so because congressional members went off on their 7-week vacation, the CDC stepped
7 weeks.
In part because of, or however long they're out of office, but now because of pressure put down by Representative Bush, the CDC now stepped back up and said, okay, we'll extend the moratorium for another couple of months. And that, in effect, kind of got the Democrats off the hook. Is that what I'm understanding?
No. So I don't think it gets them off the hook at all, because the order itself also specifically says that it gives enough time for states and localities to get that rental assistance, what we were talking about the other day on Monday, the assistance for renters and for, small landlords to get out. But there's a lot of pressure now on the states and local communities to make sure that money, that assistance, to processing those applications, that it actually gets out to people. But it also puts, I think, Democrats back in the hot seat, because by the time the House comes back from its long vacation, it's not going to be but only a couple of weeks again before we're facing this whole conversation. We're facing this whole conversation again. They'll come back sometime, I guess, in early September or so. So they will still have to pull together a deal to address housing in general. And some of the things that people are putting on the table now is like, we also have a gap in terms of actual rental assistance funding, right? We have way more people eligible for that funding and that support than the pool of money actually available. So I think it actually, it helps, right, for the moment, because like everyone's just doing the scoop, that Spider-Man pointing at each other, like it's your fault, it's your fault. And so it helps at the moment to just help alleviate things while things are getting bad with the pandemic again. But I think it does put that pressure back on Democrats to actually take action. I think it also puts pressure on them to make sure that when they're, hopefully while they're home these 7 weeks, that they're putting pressures on their local and state government or whoever agencies are processing those funds, that they're making sure that both renters and landlords know what support is available to them. Because to your point, to the conversation we were having on Monday, no one should be forced in a bad financial position because of, whatever the other issues going on are. But still with the CDC moratorium, so not anyone can just stay. There still is like a process to making sure that the moratorium covers you. And you still so landlords could actually work with their tenants in doing so too, right? Because there's also the funding available. So it just depends. But I really hope that while folks are back home in their districts, that they're actually prioritizing, communicating, and make sure people have the resources and access they need so that they're not screwed over, for lack of a better phrase.
Okay, so just to make sure that I'm keeping my scorecard correctly, obviously when you and I had this conversation earlier, I rained down condemnation against the Biden administration. So, do I need to go back and give the Biden administration a little higher grade because of this extension right now? Or do I keep the condemnation in place?
I think honestly, they responded to pressure because they could have just kept digging in. I mean, we've seen people dig in, right? But I think you should evaluate their responsiveness, because they finally did come around. And while it only took a couple of days of, sister sleeping on the Capitol steps and a bunch of other people, that served as an impetus, I think, to drive people's concern and outrage and really frustration. But the Biden administration, acted. So let's see what happens next. So,
And what Sister Bush did, if that's what it takes, again, we have to remember the words of Frederick Douglass. Power is never conceded without a struggle. And so clearly the power structure met a struggle in the voice and the actions of Sister Bush. And so what you're telling me, I want to be clear, that when I go to my Biden report card, I can now move him from an F. I can move him up at least a couple of letter grades. And then now, at least we have a 2-month extension here. And then at the end of 2 months, we can now look to see what that report card is going to look like going forward. I just want to be clear that that's the position.
I think if you want to bump him up on his progress report, I don't know about his final report card for the semester, but if you want to bump him up on his progress report for making progress, I think that makes sense.
All right.
But I think you also touched on something really important when you quoted Frederick Douglass. I saw someone else make a reference to how abolitionists moved Lincoln, right? Yeah. They saw him as a necessary ally versus this evil, force. And he had to be moved, with critical, opposition on these issues that mattered in such a way to actually get action happening. So, I think you touch on a really interesting conversation. Maybe that's a conversation we can have another time about what does it mean to build power as well as leverage it? Because I think that's something that lacks in our analysis often. We're critical of various actors in power, but what does it take for us to actually move people in power into action? I think is actually something that's worth discussing and exploring in the future.
And listen, I'll go ahead and just give my brief thoughts on Lincoln and, in regards to Biden like that.
Oh yeah, go ahead.
I don't find it necessary for a person in a position of leadership to come in with all the right answers. Sometimes they can come in as a blank canvas. And then it is incumbent upon us through our vote, as you were talking about the power of the vote, and we're going to dovetail that into Sister Turner. But it is incumbent upon us through our voting mechanism that if we have a candidate or a person in position of power who is a blank slate, we can come in and help paint that canvas. So in the case of Lincoln, obviously there are a lot of things that Lincoln did that we have to give him credit for. The Emancipation Proclamation being one, inviting Blacks or allowing Blacks to fight in the Civil War, being the architect behind the 13th Amendment, setting up the Freedmen's Bureau, which established a lot of our historical Black colleges and universities. So there's a long list of things that we can certainly give him credit for. And so I look at that in the same light of Biden. If Biden needed to be moved by the actions of Sister Bush, by sisters like yourself talking about it on programs like this, and so many other folks taking to the streets to extend the eviction notice, God bless him for at least being amenable to that, because Lord knows negative 45 wouldn't have heard not one of the cries as it affected people that were outside of his economic sphere. And so with that being said, in the case of Sister Turner, you talked about the fact that we need to look at change. And I've always said this: if you want something you never had before, you must be willing to do something you never done before. And people like AOC, like Sister Turner, which I gladly, is probably one of the most heartfelt contributions, political campaign contributions I've ever made in my life, was to give to this sister. And I do it over and over again because I certainly love her spirit. But if the people of Cleveland, if the people of the United States now get a representative who maintains the status quo, all we have to do is look back at whether or not we cast a vote for change, because clearly this sister threatened the status quo. And I'm so proud of the race that she put forward. I'm proud of the position that she takes. It is that type of leadership, that type of willingness to speak truth to power, to go against the norm, to see the problems as they exist and be willing to usher in a better solution to it. So to that, Sister Turner gets all of our love and for running a good race. And as she stated, we can see the promised land. We just didn't cross the river, but trust and believe we're going to cross that river.
Absolutely. And I think that is a fine note to end it on as we get ready to switch over to Like It or Not. We're a little bit flowy this morning, a little bit late, blame it on me. I need a clock on my desk, but
Sister Noah,
I appreciate you, Brother Carl.
No, but let me say this, and I so appreciate you, because when I listen to you as you start this show, the wealth and depth of information that you bring to the conversation is just absolutely impeccable. So thank you so much for being a wealth of knowledge, of informing us, to giving us things to chew on and think about. You're absolutely phenomenal. So thank you so much.
Thank you, brother. Thank you so much. And now I'm going to kick it back over to the crew for our break and belatedly starting Like It or Not. So I appreciate y'all for being patient with me. But it's a lot going on. And I think that we just need to make sure we have really bold leaders, and we got to make the case about why that change is necessary. So, brother, really appreciate our conversation.
Good morning again, everybody. We're going to go ahead and get our Patreon list read off again before Zoom shuts down on me again and don't want me to be great. Hey. Yeah. All right, our new patrons for the day. New patrons for yesterday. We have Parker. We have Tamara. Our new Twitch subscribers. We have James from the internet. It's a different James. It's not me, y'all. I'm Bolo from the internet, that James. All right. Quad 185. Carlos Danger 20. Sif 27. We have Francis the Rogue who resubscribed. We have Sammy Lynn. Sammy Lynn, good morning. Sammy Lynn the Con Dragon who gifted one community subscription. Sis Q Cat cheered 200 bits. Good morning, Sis Q Cat. Hollywood 2000 cheered 100 bits. Rachel Letney cheered 100 bits. Good morning, Rachel. And the Identity Booth rated our channel with a party of 3 last night. All right, the Identity Booth, we appreciate y'all, man. Make sure that y'all stay tuned. If you have not already, like it or not, I'm sorry, patreon.com/like it or not, patreon.com/like it or not, which is starting up next, y'all. Y'all stay tuned. Ben swear he love him some funk music. He's so old, y'all. Jesus. Good morning, Brother Ben. Good morning. Justice Jaconas, good morning, Justice. Shout out to everybody that's tuning in, Twitch, Twitter, Facebook, YouTube, wherever you are streaming from. Welcome, welcome, welcome. Hit that like button for me. Hit the subscribe, comment. You know when, like it or not, the Benjamin Dixon Show and everything else is going down, y'all. Emily French, good morning. Marjorie, good morning, y'all. Brother Goku, good morning. Here you go. It happened again. Oh, okay. I'm still here. I made it. Rosie, I appreciate you. Thank you so much. Got you. Jago, good morning. I was somewhere else for a minute. Who was the sister? I had to find out, let you know. Shantae, good morning. Laura Estrada, good morning, y'all. Y'all, it is time for Like It or Not, so make sure that you stay tuned. It's about to go down.
Like It or Not with Benjamin Dixon starts now.
Hey, Anoa.
Rebecca, hi, I miss you.
I missed you too, girl. How are you?
I'm doing all right.
Look,
It's so good.
you're finally here. I know. And it's okay because everybody has been talking about, Noah's been here. And I'm like, how's she here? And she ain't here. Like, how is she, everybody else gets to have her, but we haven't had her here yet with me because that's the most important thing. And I feel like they didn't get that.
It's absolutely the most important thing to be here with you. And it is I can't even get the words, but I miss you so much. So I'm really happy that we get to kick it this morning.
No, I missed you a million times, and I haven't seen you in forever. I know that some point during the pandemic we were supposed to meet up, but got lost in whatever was happening in the world. So hopefully we can, because I'm vaccinated. I mean, people still getting sick when they vaccinated, but I want to see you in person. So
I want to see you too. Happen. I'm willing to chance it because I love you and I miss you so much. And so y'all like Rebecca, like we've actually only been on a stream together one time, and that was when y'all had that studio. Mm-hmm. That studio has been through so many different things, but that studio up in Marietta, when y'all had the other show, before you started doing Like It or Not, like way back when you and Ben were first starting together, and I came on and just did a segment about
5 years ago. That was like almost 5 years ago.
It's been a long time. It's been a long time. So I'm excited that we get to have this conversation. And like I said to you, so I texted Rebecca this morning. I was like, hey, I guess I get to kick it with you this morning. But we were just talking about, thinking about, what happened in Ohio, but also just thinking about Black women, progressive women in political spaces and building our own independent space and power. It was like a really awesome, I think, way this worked out this morning for us to be in conversation together, thinking about like, what does it mean to chart our own course? And definitely just, lifting up the senator and her race and example that she sets.
Yes. And, Nina Turner, to me, and yes, I'm happy that we're here because we get to talk about this. And I know that if you guys don't follow her on Twitter, you should, because she pulls no punches. That's how the Americans say it. She doesn't play games, okay? She reads people's their rights for free. And I'm talking about Anoa. But Nina Turner,
her spirit, she's everything, her spirit, her mind, her words, seeing her out there on the streets and fighting for us and for things that we need as a people. I also thought of Cori Bush in this particular week as well. How she's out there on the streets fighting for the people, won this congressional seat. And I thought, geez, if she can do it and keep on pushing, I know Nina Turner can as well. Because at the end of the day, the fight doesn't end because you didn't win. You know what I mean? Absolutely. For Nina Turner, I mean, she was even on the show and was like, listen, my task has been to help the people. I'm for the people, regardless of how many times I've been pushed down. I mean, she spoke into me when she was on this show, and I got a chance to really talk to her. And she was pouring into me. And I think in this particular moment, on today's show, I would love to just pour back into her because there's a million things I can go down the list and say, but that hasn't already been said. So as far as like just showing her love and, knowing that she's still going to fight for us, because I know it for sure. And we just kill all the noise that's happening on social media, the rhetoric about her and all this stuff that I'm just like, y'all don't get no sleep just to hate. Y'all just don't get any sleep just to have hate in your heart yet. Everything that Nina Turner has said, and I know that you have a relationship with her, and because of you, and I was telling the audience this, because of you, sticking right beside me, right? When I was just a baby in politics and trying to understand what it was like being a Black woman in this space and speaking for Black women in this space. I honestly, I thank God for you because you were able to be like, well, what's your opinion on it, Rebecca? How do you feel about it? No, how do you feel about it? Regardless of what's being regurgitated throughout, the media and things like that. And you are a journalist, but you have feelings too. How do you feel about it? Do you know the policies? And I'm grateful for you with that. Yesterday with Nina Turner's loss, what do you see happening on the up and up? Because I know like I said, I can go through the whole scale of all the bad, but what do you see happening on the up and up?
So I put on a shirt that I've had since the 2018 election, right? Let me see if I can show y'all. So Stacey, Paulette, David, Ben, and then Andrew, right?
Love.
And I'm gonna tie this into Nina. Okay. So this was a shirt when I was on staff at Democracy for America in 2018. They ran these shirts, and that was the people of color slate of governors that they had nominated in 2018. None of those people won ultimately, and are governor right now, right? Stacey Abrams, Paulette Jordan, right down the list, right? Yeah. Andrew Gillum, Ben Jealous, none of these people are ultimately became governor. However, they have all either, hopefully Stacey will be running again and I might be able to call her governor in Georgia. But Paulette Jordan, I think ran or is running for Senate. These were all amazing, transformative candidates with dope politics, committed to the people, really salt of the earth folks who absolutely deserve to win. But what we know in politics, that it's not about, unfortunately, who deserves to be leading and winning in these races. Unfortunately, ultimately, a lot of times it comes down to how, the money shakes out, who is making certain moves in terms of either turning out particular sets of voters. Like when you think about a special election, right? These are regular elections. And you think about the complexity of a special election. One, most people don't even know what the hell a special election means or is when we think about most of our folks, right? Yeah. You also think about the Ohio 11. It was a seriously gerrymandered district. There was a picture. It looked like a really weird, T-shaped, jagged edge tool type of situation. Like it's a very weird shaped district as well, right? It runs from parts of Cleveland all the way down to Akron. And it kind of goes like this. It's a very weird looking district. So there were a lot of different, there's a lot of, just money, like there were IEs running against her. There were IEs running in support of her too. But I think part of the lesson from these 2018 races and what I think of when I think about, Senator Turner, whether she decides to run in the, 2022, the midterm election for that seat, or she decides to do something else, I think it's
making sure that we are still shifting and defining for ourselves what the narrative is about these wins, right? We used to talk about redefining the win. And that's not that, we just sugarcoat it. Right. But we actually look at what is I think for the senator to have built the platform and support and base, but just to have the deep history in Cleveland, folks are talking about, potentially Congresswoman-elect, most likely Congresswoman-elect Shontel Brown, because that is a heavily DC. The primary is pretty much the general, is a real Cleveland girl. So is Nina Turner. Nina Turner is a daughter of a Cleveland in the same way. She worked in the Cleveland City. She served in the Cleveland City Council. I'm fumbling over my words, y'all.
That's a lot to say. But Cleveland City Council.
City Council. She was a state representative, state senator representing part of that area. She's taught at the community college there. So, she also has those same roots and connections. Yeah. But when you have the existing Dem infrastructure which is responsible for communicating and engaging Dem voters, working its race the way it did, we have to build our own outside juggernaut, our own outside political machine. This is something that folks have been talking about for years, and it just takes time. So one non-win is not necessarily the end of the world. And I was looking at some of the Twitter commentary and the comments and stuff. Ultimately, what it is we just got to keep penetrating, keep making the case to the people. And that's something that I've learned, from Senator Turner over the years. So once upon a time, Senator Turner, my first real interaction with Senator Turner was probably in 2017, 2018, somewhere around in there over the years, getting to know and understand more about what does it mean to be progressive while Black? What does it mean to build these spaces? And how do we navigate, coming back to our folks? Our folks don't necessarily use these types of labels like progressive and neoliberal. These don't necessarily mean anything to us. Yeah. But these issues, right? These issues that are very much bread and butter issues that affect our communities, whether they're talking about healthcare, we're talking about raising the wage, whether we're talking about addressing issues in Social Security,
homelessness,
homelessness, housing,
all the way
all
down
of this
the
stuff.
line. Yeah, she's all the way down the line. And as a Black woman,
absolutely,
of faith too, they're going to expect her to be a certain kind of way. How conservatives we see how they are, especially when they're people of faith, they're just one kind of way. And she's what they consider radical to be a woman of faith, but to say, hey, a woman's choice. Hey, y'all got a problem with that? Health, okay, healthcare for everyone. Is there an issue with that? And I love how that's what I call for the people. And that's also what I call a true person of faith. We're not going to exclude anybody. And especially as a leader, we believe that everyone should have help in any way. And no one should be discriminated against because of your sexuality, because of your race, and this is things that she stood on constantly. And a lot of people tried to, rip it apart for a long time and say that it wasn't authentic. That's not somebody who is speaking from the heart, all kinds of things. But she showed that. And when Ben recently went to canvass with the people in Ohio, the people were happy. The people were literally, I love her in this blonde though, that blonde was everything. But the people were happy. The people were out, just could not wait to just go door to door. The people couldn't wait to fellowship together because they just knew this is going to mean something so amazing. And that's why I say, just because she didn't win, I believe with everything in me that this is going to be a great example of somebody who doesn't stop and who is going to continue. Now, I will say on the personal side of it, it really kind of broke me for 5 minutes, right? And then I had to kind of get myself together, and I'll say why. Because I feel like progressives, like you say, there's not much like us, and we got to keep on pushing. This is what she said too when she was on the show. We got to keep on pushing. We got to keep on penetrating. We got to keep the call, because this is our call to action. Nobody's going to do it. If we don't do it, no one's going to do it, right? Not one person. And especially Black women in these spaces. They minimize our voices. They say that we're too strong. So it's we're tasked with so much, but then it's when we get in and say, hey, since you're telling me to do all of this, I might as well just run and be a leader. And now it's a problem. And now so many things are lined up against you. And because you're such a progressive in that space, it's one thing to run as, a Democratic Black woman and, someone who just leans a little bit more, leans left, but has a little bit conservativeness to them. But when you are a Black woman and you're progressive and you're pushing these policies that to many people are super radical. Are we serious about raising the wage? How is that radical for the people? Getting people health care? Like, how is that so radical? But because it's not normal, those kind of things just don't seem to be normal here in the US. And so they're going to look at her as a crazy person. But I love that she is progressive and she runs on a little bit more radical views to me than well, I wouldn't even say they're radical because to me, this stuff should be, but she runs on views that people see as, hey, girl, you might be doing a little too much. You might be doing a little too much. And she's just like, how is this too much when everybody needs it? I don't understand how this is too much. And I'm going to keep on pushing for that. So in these spaces, even for me and you, Anoa, who may speak against things that are most popular in this liberated, democratic, really left-wing space, but you're like, yeah, okay, but I don't agree with that. I don't agree with that. And that.
No, I think definitely. Mm-hmm. I think you're definitely touching on several points. I mean, I remember interviewing Senator Turner in 2018 in the corner of a dress barn or something like that. It was a campaign stop for Stacey Abrams during the primary. And we were just talking about like the importance, like why was she even there in Georgia, doing that work? I think she may have just stepped in to lead Our Revolution at the time. I can't remember the timeline of her leading Our Revolution, but I think it might've been right around then. But we were talking about like, why was it important to be there in Georgia on the ground doing that GOTV? And like, we were outside the city. We weren't in Metro Atlanta. We were like down, an hour outside the city too, having this conversation. And it was just so fascinating seeing her there. Cause, especially like, I don't know if folks remember this, but, there was a time where progressives like, oh, Stacey's not really a progressive. Oh, and all this other stuff. But she was just talking about the commonality and what was the beauty about how Stacey was running her race and building her coalition. And so when we look at that coalition building, when we look at that support that's happening on the ground, like that is something that the senator understands very much too, like investing and building with the people. And that's just something that needs to continue happening. It's tough because that's not the work that's always funded, but it's definitely the work that is necessary. And it's why so many groups do the year-round civic engagement, touching that touch work, but also the political power building, right? Like, what are we building for? Who are we building with, and why, or what do we hope the outcome to be? And so we keep losing a special election. It's not the end. It's not the end of the revolution the way everyone else. I actually differ with a lot of people about what the real revolution actually even is. But I do think that we have a responsibility to provide our own narratives about what this means. And I don't think this means that there was something wrong with Senator Turner at all. But just the fact that it was a special election, it was, a lot of people who traditionally do not vote, right, are not necessarily people engaged in a special election. So that just takes so much more work. So there's such an uphill battle to build a coalition outside the traditional mainstay of the Democratic Party. But some of those folks who are part of the traditional mainstay of the Democratic Party did support Senator Turner as well, right? She does have support in Cleveland. So that's the other narrative. It's not that this was a complete absolute bad blowout and, she doesn't have support in her own home turf. She does, right? She has her own base of support. She received the support of the local paper, right? So we have seen that, but it's just growing that because it's still, a lot of our folks are not tuned in. They're not sitting here watching morning broadcasts of super political, deep conversations. They're doing the work of living and breathing and trying to exist in a pandemic. So I don't begrudge anyone for not engaging. I mean, one of the things that she talks about when I interviewed her a couple of weeks ago for News One was that there had been such low turnout in the presidential election even, right? So this is an area that has already been, left behind and severely depressed and is not engaging
at, particular levels, even in a presidential. So we can hope that people might be inspired. But I think that it just takes more really showing people why it matters that we have bold leadership. And like we just saw from Cori Bush, it matters that we have bold leadership. It matters that we replace Democrats who are simply there holding as standard barriers for the status quo with people who are willing to take bold leadership and move steps forward. Cori Bush is the first person not named Clay with the last name Clay in like 50 something years to hold that seat. Lacy Clay inherited that seat from his father, who held that seat since the late 60s. So that is already such a meaningful, impact that we're looking at. We look at folks like Sister Attica Scott over in Kentucky. I think she's running in the Kentucky 3rd congressional district race. Attica that's another solid Dem race. She's taking on, a white Dem who has, a decent enough voting record, but we need bold leadership. We need bold. We're in a time that is demanding bold leadership and bold moving forward. So,
the key word is bold. The key word is bold. It's not that we're saying the the other candidate isn't, she isn't worthy. Black, look, I said I'm rooting for everybody Black, but I'm past that season now. Black and bold is where I'm at. I need to know what policies you're standing on, because it can't just be, if we're just still on the I'm rooting for everybody Black thing, then we're just going to have, situations where it's like Obama. We already went through that. We already went through, okay, we got the Black guy. Okay, we got the Black woman. We see with Kamala Harris, everybody Black ain't all of that now. It ain't all of that. Okay, so we need people who are actual, real, who really understand and can be out there and do the work. And we see that in Cori Bush. I see in even smaller elections, like in Buffalo, New York, with India Walton, who decided, she's a whole nurse, she got kids, everything. She decided, I'm going to go ahead and run for mayor. I'm going to run for mayor. And, and she made it. This is something that hasn't even been, it's the policies, it's the things that she's running on. It's the reality of her life. And she knows that
Tashara Jones in St. Louis is another example. Tashara was an amazing candidate in 2017, ran a very vigorous, competitive mayoral election, unfortunately fell a little short. Partly because, people who wasn't really pulling no votes decided to stay in instead of getting behind her, endorsing her. But she came back, and knocked it out the park and is now mayor of St. Louis 4 years later. But what was really critical, I think about when you think about St. Louis and think about Tashara as mayor, Tashara is someone else who I met down here, canvassing for Stacey in 2018, right? So that's the other thing, right? When you have progressive Black women also recognize the power of standing together. And this is not, again, like you were saying, this is not to diss, incoming most likely Representative Brown at all. She ran her race. She did her thing. That's what it was. Yeah. But when we're talking about what does it mean to build alternative systems of power, what does it mean to shift beyond the status quo? It takes all of us digging in together and figuring out how do we build collectively in a way that lifts all of us up, but that also is engaging our folks who may not be as engaged as we need them to be, because we need people voting. If we're going to overcome the power structure, we need people engaging in those spaces, overcome the power structure, at least in terms of the electoral engagement process. We need our folks voting in these primary elections, right? We need our folks voting in these special elections and things of that nature, because that's the only way we're going to be able to push forward. And when I look at Tashara as an example and see just the work, we're coming up on the anniversary of Ferguson, in a few days. And when you think about from 2014, when Michael Brown was murdered, to now 2021, organizers in Ferguson have not only flipped a mayoral seat, they have flipped two prosecuting attorney positions, the county, St. Louis County, and St. Louis City attorney positions, right? So you now have Black prosecutors in both of those positions who actually have been, making some moves. They have flipped several city council, they call them board of aldermen seats as well. So when we look at the long arc of building political power and what that actually takes, it's not just a one election thing. It's not damn, we didn't do it this time, or the person I supported didn't win. And it could feel like that. I get you. I get folks. It could feel like that. It could feel like, damn, we didn't do it, or damn this. All that other, that's all like whatever. You run your race, you build your coalition, and you keep pushing because those votes are there. It's just a matter of how do we do it. But that's why like I ascribe to an electoral justice framework. And one of the things that was really dope that was explained to me, because that's kind of how I kind of shift my political coverage and reported too, thinking through the lens of electoral justice as defined by the Movement for Black Lives, Electoral Justice Roundtable. But just thinking about like, what does that mean? It's a complete shift and change in the way we view and engage with electoral politics as not just, and folks may already see this in their own, the way they approach things, but may not have used this language, but it's not just like, we just voting as an end all be all or voting to save whatever. Like voting is a tool. I mean, but this isn't even new, right? Like this goes back to like Ida B. Wells and like the way she was leveraging things around enfranchisement and as one of the many tools she was using in her fight around lynching and anti-Blackness and dismantling white supremacy back in the early 1900s. So when we're talking about like how we're engaging and what we're building, it has to be an ongoing political process. Sure, take your break, take your week or two, take your 7 weeks, I guess, to breathe, but then you come back to it. But we're also engaging and building politically with people. There's also an education process, right? Like we need to help people become re-engaged civically and why these things matter and why, like, because there's some of our folks is like, well, I don't identify with the Democratic Party or I don't believe in voting or it doesn't do anything for me. We really need to kind of still cut through and talk to people and get directly with folks about what does it mean to push and change in these ways. Because if we didn't have particular folks in office who also recognize like the boldness, if we didn't have, people putting pressure on elected officials, we might not have had even the $1,400, which was still $600 short of the $2,000 we were promised, but we wouldn't even have had that $1,400 that folks got earlier this year, right? We wouldn't have had the expansion in terms of access to the ACA. And though the ACA is not perfect, has tons of issues, but it does keep people like me with pre-existing conditions covered on their insurance. Oh, girl, so like there are there are so many different things that have been happening even in this year alone that is directly connected to the way in which we are pushing, shifting, and engaging. And so I don't really care what the internet chatter is, because the internet chatter is not what's winning elections. Yeah,
it's not what's winning elections. It's
annoying.
Push. Yeah, it's annoying.
It's annoying for sure.
Yeah, but it's the constant push that you're talking about. It's staying out there, mobilizing, because small changes lead to big changes. There are times that we do feel defeated. I had someone on yesterday, we were discussing Haiti, and we were talking about, and I say this with Ben and them, and we'll talk about, hey, us being Black folks, period, we always got to go through things that don't kill us, but make us stronger, right? And then I'm like, I'm tired of doing that. And then I was on the show yesterday speaking about Haiti with Vanya Andre of the Haitian Times. And she was like, listen, one thing about it is I hate being called resilient, because it's like, damn, we just got to take shit. We just got to just continue to get beat up and just be like, but we're going to get up into it again. I'm like, girl, I get it. I do. I understand it. It's kind of like a thing that is just in our DNA. And it's like a bad thing, but a good thing. But I think in this particular, because we wouldn't even be here if it wasn't for people like Fannie Lou Hamer, who probably didn't even see what this was going to look like today for us, right? To just be fighting how she did. You know what I mean? Like Shirley Chisholm, to do what she did, go out and have the audacity to run for president as a Black woman. These Black women have definitely paved the way. I don't think it's, and yesterday she made a point, I don't think it was the resilience, it was the drive. I think it's like, this stuff it may kill us. It may kill us, but we really have to continue to push for something different. I don't think they imagined that it would look like this today because of them, but me and you are sitting here today having this conversation because of them. Nina Turner was able to do what she did because of them. So I think, we do have to continue to mobilize. The conversation about voting itself is something that we can't stop on. We can't push pause on. We saw what happened with Stacey Abrams, right? We did. We seen exactly what happened with that. And getting out and educating people on why it's important to vote, not taking the narrative of people like, no offense, but people like celebrities like P. Diddy, who at one point was saying vote or die, turned around and said, hold your vote. Hey, this is what we got to, the vote is important. So we have to go out there and tell people why the vote is important. Because if it's up to celebrities, that's going to be wishy-washy. They're going to be taking away people's rights and taking away people's votes. And then we're going to have places where people are saying, my vote doesn't count. Why? Because P. Diddy told me so. Those kind of things. But it's up to us to keep on pushing, keep penetrating, especially these communities that no one goes into, no one wants to really, talk to people about. Then we have the suppression that's been going on. We see, and the constant fight that's happening here on our own turf in Georgia, where, it's just, we gotta keep the fight up. There are days you can take a breather. Yes, it gets hard. Yes. And
I think what you're saying is absolutely spot on about making the case. It's about approximately like close to 25% of, I think, residents in the 11th congressional district live in poverty. I think that number jumped up to closer to 33%, almost a third. If you're talking about children, it has a low, medium wage or annual income as compared to the rest of the state of Ohio. So when you look at some of the indices around the 11th congressional district as compared to the state as a whole, and then as the nation, it is lagging behind in so many of these critical areas. But that's also, due to the real systemic disinvestment that has happened in predominantly Black areas. We know about like how many of these Midwestern or some of the Northeastern, Buffalo's in a weird, I would say Buffalo is a similar type of city that has had the outflux or, they used to have manufacturing or some type of other, steady middle class job type of situation that does not exist anymore and has, left a void economically in terms of employment opportunities. There's just so much that has not been invested. And so on multiple levels, right, has been failed, many of these communities. And so like those connections, though, need to be made as to why do we need people to go into these seats who are going to advocate for these issues? Because folks will just look like, well, a Democrat's been representing this district for however many decades. What does that matter for my life? What does that mean? And I think that we really need to break it down. It's so meta. I think we need to kind of like break it down for folks and really just start talking about like, what does it mean? Like, how do we engage? But we need to be like, on message and consistent across the board as we're trying to, talk about voting as a strategic tool and measure, but also talking about what does it mean to build accountability in the process. And that's a conversation that I've had maybe 4 years ago with Senator Turner when I was really trying to formulate my own ideas.
You said 40 years ago, sis? You said
no,
40?
4. I said 4. I meant to say 4. I might have said 40. I meant to say 4. I meant to say 4, but back in like 2017 or so, when I was really trying to develop my own like understanding of how I was approaching politics, because I do find, and I am someone who's critical of Senator Sanders and, Bernie-led progressive spaces, but at the same time, that critique does not come from a place of maliciousness. It comes from, I really want to see folks do better, engage better, and grow better. And so like, I was really trying to just shape and shift and think about like, how can, progressive candidates engage in a way that is, really resonating and connecting with people? Because we're talking about the things that were absolutely affecting the means and conditions of people's lives in a way that makes sense. I remember seeing the look on the face of my younger sisters who were voting for the first time. I think one of them was voting for the first time. I don't think the other one was, like in 2016, and just really how inspired they were. But then at the same time, when it came to, one of my little sisters was in college and she voted for the first time for Senator Sanders and was really excited to volunteer. And I remember like in 2016, the whole family, one point in time, we all drove over to Birmingham, Alabama. Even my kids, we all volunteered at this event. You had my kids who were probably like, I don't know, like 12 and like 15, 14 at the time, helping with directing people to their seats. It was a whole family event. We all went. But when my sisters who voted, like, when it came time to like, what's going on? What are we doing on the ground here in Atlanta ahead of the election? Like crickets, it was nothing. And so we were having these real serious conversations moving forward. Marcus Farrell, myself, and several other people, Dr. Maria Cole, who works with Dr. Cornel West. We were having these conversations with Nina Turner and other folks back in 2017 about what does it mean to build progressive organizing spaces? What does it mean to have ongoing engagement? And there are other organizations that do this work as already. But really thinking about like I said earlier, progressive while Black, what does that mean for our folks? Because we don't use that language. So we need to kind of even the Green New Deal does not necessarily resonate with the average person because they don't necessarily know what you're talking about. So we might know these catchphrases and stuff, but how do we break it down? And I think that's something that Senator Turner has done is cutting through, talking just straight to the people about what are the issues, how do they connect? And we just need more of that happening across the board consistently to really break through the status quo, because the status quo is definitely invested, whether it's the news, whether it's people's commentary. I mean, it's a comfort zone thing for some folks, right?
Yeah.
It's what they know. And so it is not fun being uncomfortable. It's not fun. It doesn't feel good to be the one pushing on the outside. So people like to be on the inside with everyone else, but we got to do what we got to do and keep it pushing.
And we're going to keep doing. We're going to keep doing it. I know, like I said, there's days we need to take a break and a breather. Speaking of a break and a breather, we're going to take a break. We're going to come back with more of this conversation. We're going to bring Dr. Carl Mack and our beloved DJ Bubba in on the conversation because we was going to make this a nice little cute girls moment. We did what we had to do, but we'll bring the guys in. We'll get them some shine. Let's take a quick break. Bubba, take us to some music, and we'll be right back after this with more on the conversation.
All right, y'all, make sure that y'all are staying tuned. We got more coming up next. Oh, you know what? Boom. I'm going to cut the music right quick. You know why? Because somebody said they wanted to hear a joke. So y'all want to hear a joke? Here it go. Okay. Here we go. What did Dr. Dre say when 50 Cent gave him a sweater? G-Unit. G-Unit. Oh, God. We're going to do another one for Rebecca, just for Rebecca. What do you call a bear without any teeth? That should be an easy one. A gummy bear. All right, this is the last one. Why don't dinosaurs talk? Because they did. Come on, y'all. Now y'all got too much. Let me get my ass on here and tell these lame ass jokes. Okay, awesome. Oh my gosh. Y'all make sure that y'all stay tuned, y'all, okay? We got more Like It or Not coming up next. Veronica, I found all of these on the internet. All of these can be found on the internet. And it's funny because it's a whole damn website. Good, bad jokes. Poor Primus, really? He says, I'm laughing only because I'm highly medicated. Yes, indeed. I need to be that. Marquez, that was for you. You asked for them, I delivered, okay? I am starting something. I'm going to do a bumper joke of the day. Exactly, Christopher Saw. Dad jokes. I need to call my brother and get me some because I know my brother has some terrible dad jokes. Jokes? What are those? You have to elaborate for me. When you say anti, I'll immediately think of Rihanna. right, y'all. Welcome back to the screen. Rebecca, Noah, myself, and Dr. Man. Did I say Rebecca? I think I did.
Yes, you did. You started with me. But right before we get to this conversation, I wanted to go ahead and roll some words from Nina Turner herself. Let's take a look at what she stands on in her heart.
You all did this. You have been the wind beneath our wings. And we must promise ourselves that we are going to continue to work with a fierce urgency. You remember that fierce urgency of now that the Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. talked about? Well, it is now today, it'll be now tomorrow, and the next day, and the next day, and the next day, and the next day, and the next day. See, we didn't lose this race. Evil money manipulated and allowed in this election. And you see, Sister Turner got a smile on her face. Hello, somebody. Because this movement is strong. And we are going to continue moving to the people who lifted this campaign.
She said we're going to continue moving. And that, I think, is the spirit of what we're going to continue doing now. It's her power for me. Every time she speaks, it's kind of like she feels, right? And she, people will say it's preachy, it's whatever. When she was on the show, she went from preacher to sister to auntie to mom. She gave it all. And I want to know when you guys see Nina Turner, and I know you have a relationship with her, Noah, how would you describe Nina?
Wow, that's a lot. But I think, like you said, the power and just the voice, just thinking about doing the recent interview we did, it was really great sitting there and just being in conversation. I think that's the thing about her, no matter what type of, I don't know, like, I think there's a pick. I didn't have time to look for my own picks, but I think we have picks for producer David with Nina back in 2016. I was super jealous when he met her first. But I think, with Nina, she talks to folks like they're regular people, regardless of like who they are, regardless of what their position is, regardless of, what their status or organization they're connected to. And I think that's something that's really invaluable. And so I remember it was a big deal for us, with the Progressive Army, with the Benjamin Dixon show, for Nina to have the platform that she had to like also engage with us as if we were as valuable and important as being on, CNN or MSNBC. And that's something that she's stayed connected to people in her own community as well back in Cleveland. I also think back to this time, I'm getting all my years mixed up. That might've been also in 2017, meeting, Nina and Councilwoman Tara Mosley Staples from I think Tara's from Akron, and they were there, and their husbands, and like her husband is Nina's husband is amazing. He is super friendly. I mean, they fit so well together, but like it was just really good seeing her there. This was like a small gathering of like progressives at a training in Ohio, and she stopped by just to share some words, right? And like again, like this is her in the leadership of our revolution, taking a moment to stop by at this small gathering, maybe 20 people, right? So it wasn't like it was a big venue or anything, but she came through and shared some words about, the importance of building power. So like I've seen those moments where she's willing, like I talked about earlier, the interview we did where we were in the corner of a dress bar, and when she was here in 2018 doing GOTV with Stacey Abrams, like that willingness to go where the people are and talk to folks, regardless of whether it's a big forum or if it's a small, we've had our differences, we've had our disagreements, but I think at the end of the day, that's a part of how we grow, right, as movements, and being able to communicate. So her respectful engagement, even when disagreeing, is also something that I've really admired as well.
I love that because that's very important. That's actually very important to know that you said that. In these spaces, people have to understand that we can disagree. We're not going to agree on everything. And yes, I'll disagree with Nina on something. I'll disagree with you on something. I'll disagree with Ben. I'll disagree with Dr. Carl Mack, right? Because you know me and you can get it. We go at it with Ben all day. In the same
y'all get
breath,
the PC version,
right? And then, see, listen. Outside of this, we go at it all day. But the accountability, but then it's like, hey, at the end of the day, I still love you. As long as we're not abusing each other. We can agree to disagree. Might not talk to you for about 3-4 days, but I'm back in it with you because we have a fight. Dr. Carl Mack, what about you? What comes to mind? How do you describe Senator Nina Turner?
So let me be very clear here. I think one of the things that we as men can do a much better job of is listening. And we oftentimes confuse hearing with listening. Hearing is you're talking and we're formulating a response to what you have to say. Listening is we're hearing and endearing and taking to heart what you are saying. So with that being said, I cannot tell you how much I've enjoyed just listening to two queens chop it up and teach me. So I'm going to shut the hell up, like it or not, and I'm going to let you queens do what you do. I want to listen.
I knew he was going to say something like this. I was like, I already know where he's going with this. I already know. Listen, you can always join in on the conversation. Bubba, look, or what about you? Because, Dr. Carl Mack is going to sit and he's going to listen, which I love. What about you, Bubba? Is there anything that you would add when it comes to describing Senator Nina Turner?
Powerful, strong-willed, just a hard-working woman. I wish you would have won, but I know it's great things coming for her in the future. So I'm upset that she didn't win, but I'm not disappointed because she has a great future and powerful outlook. So yeah, that's it. I came in the middle of the conversation. So hey, y'all.
Yeah, because Bubba had shut down a little bit, but he's back. He's back in. Right. And listen, I'm so grateful because I don't even think that I would even know a Nina Turner and a Noah Chunga. I don't even think I would know of even Cori Bush, although, she's more recent. I don't think I would know any of this if it wasn't for Ben, any of y'all in these spaces, if it wasn't for Ben, the importance of canvassing, if it wasn't for Ben, the importance of voting and understanding when these people are running for something, learning their policies, how will it affect you? And if you have plans in the future, I'm not a mother now, but I plan to be a mother in the future. How will this person who will be in this seat in the next few years, how will that affect me and my future plans? With me having what we were discussing that Noah, pre-existing conditions, and not being able to get health care at one point. Is this person sitting in this seat going to be someone who pushes for policies that mean something to people who look like me, that mean something to people with uteruses? Like, what does how is this person going to be able to assist and help me or people in their cities or in their states that look like me? And just seeing women who just probably like 50 years ago would never be able to do what they are doing right now in these particular states. I think that is a step forward. A loss is a loss, but that doesn't stop us. That doesn't stop us from doing the work. I have changed from just starting, like you were discussing us being in the studio, in that little studio that done been through so many changes and so many different leaderships and
so many changes.
There's so much bad energy over there.
So much bad juju, bad mojo in that place. Like, I hope they saged it down before somebody else moved up in there. Like, it's just so bad. But that's a whole nother story.
Yeah, I know. It's crazy. But even me being there and starting out as just somebody on the left, right? Just, a little young, because, they wanted to push all us millennials in the front of the conversation because Donald Trump was now president. And it was like, yeah, the millennials, put them out there in the conversation. 2 years later, it's like, yeah, forget the millennials, Generation Z. And then I started becoming a little extra about it. I'm like, you know what? I'm a little progressive. I'm a little, and now I'm a socialist right now. I'm feeling really edgy. I'm saying things that probably my dad would be like, girl, if you don't go have a seat, I'm against the grain on it. And this is what people are calling radical, right? And it's like, you know what? I sit and I think it ain't radical for me to want healthcare, like that healthcare that I can afford, or free healthcare. I shouldn't have to pay. And if I don't have money, just be sent somewhere to die, or just be operated on, still sent a medical bill, and the operation was in some kind of rinky-dink place because I couldn't afford a specialist.
Girl, like with my health too, I was telling my dad recently, I saw one of the bills for I'm in the middle of a radiation infusion treatment process over the next few months for this rare cancer. And I saw what they bill for my one single treatment costs Emory allegedly over $100,000 for one treatment. Wow. I don't even make that much in a year.
Wow.
Thankfully, that's nowhere near my portion, thankfully. And I know, like I said, the ACA is trash. There are so many different things, but there are some safeguards in there that actually are allowing me to get treatment that I'm actually functioning, and I'm able to sit here and kick it with y'all in the morning, right? And still do my other work, et cetera. But I think so much of what you're saying is like spot on, because so many of us, whether it's us directly or people in our family, our immediate family, we are living with very compounded issues, and we need people who are going to speak to those, means and conditions. I think Brother Mac had raised it on Monday when we were talking about the eviction moratorium, also being concerned about how are we paying and covering stuff. And that was a really masterful conversation we had, because, you also took it to there in terms of the values of the country and how much we spend, in terms of militarism, which is way astronomically more than any other country, on earth. But that value system and really nurturing and engaging folks on like what is possible, pushing the limits of possibility, helping us expand our imagination. I don't want to get into too much like sci-fi and fantasy right now, but like, that's why I love the fact the way my dad raised us and allowed us to like explore and imagine and ideate on all these things, because like we can help vision new futures and new ways of doing and creating things that hopefully, whether it's the millennials, and as a first generation millennial, as an older millennial, I will never call myself a geriatric millennial. That's some BS. But terrible. Like, the Goonies generation, like we've gone from we've gone from no internet to dial-up internet to now gig internet and live streaming and Wi-Fi. And I was actually looking at a video my siblings and I did in 2013 on our cell phones. And it was like, you could tell how awkward we all were trying to record videos. And now it's like a standard thing. Little kids can do their own videos and live streams.
They know how to maneuver. They know how to maneuver.
That same,
in there.
Yeah, that same visioning we have with technology and these other aspects of our culture, we need to have with the politic and the way we do the business of living, existing, and thriving, and not just dying, right? Like, so we need to have those people who are going to help us shift. And that's why we need bold leadership, like, the Senator Turners, like the Cori Bushes, like the Ayanna Presleys. Like, there are folks who who were like, what's the point of Ayanna Pressley running? She's running against a solid Dem. He has decent votes. Mark Caputo, or whatever his name was, he has good votes. Like, why would she do that? But Ayanna Pressley has been phenomenal, not just in, Congress, but also for the culture and what she has done for Black women and conversations around our hair, being, bold and brave and talking about like alopecia. There's just so much that is happening that is really transformative on so many multiple levels that we can't just say we can only challenge Republicans, and they should be challenged most definitely. But there are Democrats, there are people who are holding space and blocking progress that need to be challenged too.
That's no, listen, that point sister, is something. Go ahead.
And I have to add this, and I'm sorry. Again, I promise you I'm learning so much. And Queen Azor, when you said first they don't want to hear from the millenniums, now Trump gets in, everybody wants to hear it now that he's gone. Okay, y'all sit down and be quiet. But, when you were talking about Sister Turner and this progressive leadership, the thing that is interesting to me is that when it comes to the power structure, progressive is a good thing. It's progressive when we give CEOs these astronomical salaries. It's progressive when we bail out big corporate America. It's progressive when we privatize the profits and socialize the debt. It's progressive when subsidies are not, it's not progressive when subsidies are given out in the case of food stamps, but it's very progressive when subsidies are given out to farm workers, when most of those farmers are something other than people of color. So depending on who's in power, they can take a word and try to redefine its meaning to be something negative. So I find it destructive when a sister like Sister Turner could be labeled progressive, and now all of a sudden it's as though it is a bad thing for women to want health care, for women to be recognized, to be heard. So from that perspective, sisters, stay progressive and do not allow, my mentor, late Dr. Edward Jones told me, he who defines rules. The word progressive, the way that they've used it and what they've used it to do, everything was cool in the game. Sisters, what you need to be progressive, claim it, redefine it, and go get it. Like it or not.
Like it. Here you go. Like it or not.
Point, no. I'm now back to listening. I ain't got nothing else to say because I love listening to you all. It is such a warm perspective to just hear the two of you chop it up. So I'm listening. Go ahead.
Yes. No one is big sis. Okay. But honestly,
Rebecca, you shine though. Like I remember we were sitting there. And so Ben and I are also very different in what we think works or what we think is like the way to do this. Right. Yes. He's very straight man sometimes with the way his approach is. And I'm not very linear. At times. But like Rebecca, I will never forget when we would have those sessions. So like I would spend a couple of weeks working with Rebecca and two other sisters on just sharpening, their political commentary. And I say sharpening, because like, when you sharpen up a really good knife, right? Like they already had the edge. They already had the knowledge. And that was the one thing that I wanted them to understand, right? Ben was like, oh, you got to teach them. I don't got to teach these girls nothing. These young women, nothing. Right. I don't got to teach them nothing. And I don't think I came at y'all like I'm teaching you something. It's just like you all have, really good perspectives. You all already had an eye for news. I mean, and two of y'all was J school trained, right? Like, so you already got that skill set, that development. It was just like the comfort and getting comfortable. And Rebecca, you have done an amazing job over the past few years, in particular, of really owning that comfort and stepping into, I was really excited when you were able to give me comments on a piece I wrote about Haiti, just because the international spheres, particularly, and then I wanted to make sure I was including perspective, but I was also right on track. So the few minutes that we had talked for that one piece I was writing was so important to me because you provided really great context but you also helped me make sure I was on the right track in the way I was giving coverage. So I really do appreciate having watched you, step into your own more as that political analyst you are, but you already had it in you. Right. You just needed to trust in yourself and bring it out. So I might be big sis, but you were definitely, holding it down and doing what you needed to do. So I really just wanted to say that this morning. Thank you so much for that. That's what I learned from Nina about, moving it forward and lifting up when necessary.
Yeah. You know what? Ben eventually said you're right because we needed you. Right. And we would be like, where's the Noah? Where's the Noah? Because Ben is doing this thing again. He's doing that thing again where we can't just be here. We're all over here. Big
tried to do progressive commentator school. And I was like, nah, bro, we're not doing this. This is not what we're doing.
And you know how I am. I'm going to be like, but I don't like it that way. And then the other two were exactly the same. So they're just like, maybe if we move in this direction, and then it's like, you got three of us, but then you put us with a Noah, and a Noah was like, well, how do you want it? How do you like, what works for you? And all of us were like, well.
And Ben would just look like they listen to you. I'm like, because I'm listening to them first.
She's asking us what we want, how we feel when, about this particular person and their policies. What does that mean to you? And you're like, don't give me the journalistic answer. You have a voice. what does that mean for you? Now I'm like, okay, well, if I can have an opinion and have a conversation, and we would just literally break it down and have conversations, and she'll help us understand. Like,
and that was some of the best. That was some of the best stuff. I wish we had that. I wish we had B-roll of that stuff. Like that was some of the best stuff. We should have been recording that. I mean. But what you're saying though, like that's just how, other folks have helped me understand how to develop a voice, how to be in this space, right? Like I don't have like broadcast, like y'all both had, I think you and Valeria both had broadcast experience too, right? Mm-hmm. Like, so there was we already had this group there was a project that was being worked on, and we don't need to rehash what that was. Mm-hmm. But I mean, I'm not trapped behind an NDA, but that's messy. We don't need to bring mess into this. But
and you also help us out with that. Hold on. And when you also help us out with that, just want to say thank you for that, because you were like, listen, I have lawyer experience. Okay, so show me the paperwork. What needs to be done? This is what you're going to do. This is what you're going to do. Because I was like, everybody get out of my way. Where's Anoa? Where's Anoa? Because if you don't know, Anoa has background in this. Where is she? I need her to talk to me. I don't want to talk to anybody. And you helped me even get through that. And you checked on me after that whole process. And that to me is sisterhood. Like you didn't have to do that. Like you were like, hey, let's go do brunch real quick. Let's just have a conversation. Like, let me just see where your head is at, Rebecca. How are you feeling? And that meant everything to me. And I'm pretty sure Nina has done that for so many people, and you've done that for me, and I'm doing that for other people. And that's what I'm saying. Like all down when it looked like it was not going to look good for me after that whole, debacle in that place. My God. When I really fell into just a place of just not a good place. And you reached out to other Black women who reached out to me and was like, tell your story, girl. We've been there too, sis. What's up? And I was like, who gave you my number? And they were like, Anoa. And then we just wanted to send you some love. And we wanted to let you know that we are here too. So it was this group of Black women when I felt like I was defeated, who came and lifted me up because of you. And I'm very grateful for that. Just giving me an opportunity to share my story and not be scared. Like, you're like, don't be afraid, Rebecca. You don't have to do it if you don't want to, but don't be afraid, because
this is the unseen work, right? When we talk about, especially we just had Black Women Equal Pay Day yesterday, right? So there's so much unseen labor that women generally, but Black women in particular, I feel you talked about some of like our great heroines earlier, Fannie Lou Hamer, Ida B. Wells, Ella Baker. I mean, there's so many, there are countless others, people, Constance Bakley, I'm messing up names. I apologize, y'all, this morning.
Shirley Chisholm, like we go down the list and it's forever. Like there's so many.
But that's also part of our unseen work. And I think that's also part of the organizing. I think that's also part of the lesson and legacy. Like I said, Senator Turner and I, we have, had our differences and disagreements, but I think that the validation, the support, it really struck me. Again, the interview I just recently did with her for News One, she actually referenced at two different points in the conversation coverage that I've done over the past year and a half, 2 years. I didn't even realize she was keeping up with things that I've done. Whether she was keeping up with it or she had Googled it before our conversation, whatever it was, but for her to be able to clearly say, I think you had mentioned this before, and she was rather succinctly on point with something that I maybe had said or whatever, but that just recognition and that uplifting that's also part of our work and our nature, right? That's part of what we also do for each other. And that's how we're able to still have, bold conversations and people moving forward and being able to continue this, because it is not easy weathering the storm. It is not easy running through the gauntlet. It is not easy defeating a juggernaut, especially when they're beating down on you as a person, right? As an individual, when they're, it's fine if you don't like something I said. It's fine if you don't like something I did one time, but when you're literally attacking the core of somebody, that hurts. And that can be a very deep thing to go through. Yeah. But it's that other work that we've done in terms of how do we lift, engage, and support each other through those times, and we continue to still build forward, whatever building forward it looks like. And to be clear, Nina owes no one a rematch for their congressional race. If that's what she chooses to do, that's what she chooses to do. She chooses to do something different, and that's just fine too. But it is that other work of how do we collectively build? And so when we are redefining and shifting for ourselves, what does it mean to politically engage? We're looking at folks as a whole, person that we're taking, and not just, okay, we're going to do this political thing real quick and that's it. And that's so much the extractive nature of politics that we need to get away from and make sure we're not reproducing in our own spaces. And that's when the lessons I was learning, earlier on. And that's something that like my genuine, like when I decide to work with people, when we're going to engage, and especially when it's something like developmental and we're collectively building, it becomes more that interpersonal thing as well. Like, how are you? Are you okay? And there are so many Black women in my life who have done it, and other women of color too, who will like just check on me. Like, yes, they may want me to come and do some project or work on something or a presentation, whatever, but it's first like, sis, how are you?
How are you?
Do you need anything? Like, what's going on? Like, I did want to talk to you about this project, but let me step back for a second because maybe that's not the right thing. And it's not even that people, a lot of times it's like people get excited and want to work with people that they really admire and they love doing work with. But it's also recognized that even though I really want you on this project, maybe this is not the right thing for you. And so that care and value for self and for each other is also something that really needs to be built into our politic as well. And I know that can get into like the touchy-feely self-care culture stuff that not everyone appreciates, but there's real value in that because we also build stronger relationships and bonds. And that's also that loyalty, because that's super important when we're going through these battles and these fights, because dismantling the status quo is not an easy task at all.
When you're doing it especially as people who look like us, when you're challenging somebody
black,
but just black and black,
nappy hair,
blackity black, and with the vagina, and that's a problem for some reason. For some folks, it's just people get shifty. I don't know what it is, but I look back and just hearing you talk and I just recall and I'm like, even if you're hitting me up to do something, right? It's like, let me check on her first. And the fact that you hit me up and you thought of me and said, nah, she's good. She's good at what she does. I'm going to definitely I'm choosing her to do this. And I'm also checking on her. When Nina came on, she was like, no, Miss Rebecca, I watched the show. I know you. I was like, who, me? me, like, and it's like, people are watching, people are admiring, people are understanding, and there are a lot of people that may say, I don't like the way Rebecca presents. But there are so many other people who are like, this girl, this sister, this woman, and her voice is very important. Anoa, I hear your name in almost every conversation. I'll be watching something random, and then people are like, Anoa Chunga of such and such movement. Anoa this. She said, and she's a strong woman and out there who was fighting in Georgia. I
don't know who these people are.
And it's mad people who be having conversations about you. And then but your voice, even if it's just a Twitter thread that hit on Twitter and everybody's reposting it, your voice matters in these spaces. Even if it's something that you said against someone, because of you, I took those chains of fear off when it was that certain person that I was working with. And I was like, he done hurt so many other Black women. And if my story can get out there and help another person and tell them that, listen, you will not be blacklisted. You won't. Okay. You know that you're fighting for something so much bigger. The work is not something that that's stolen, right? We're working together. This is pure. This is authentic. And nobody can steal my voice because they don't like the fact that I called them out and we're working in the same space. No one will bully any of us in these spaces. At all. So anywho, I say all this to say that is what I see with Nina. She didn't allow so many people tried to break her, tried to bully her, tried to silence her voice. And she worked through that to get where she is. We had Park Cannon on the show, actually. I
love Park Cannon. And oh my God, Park Cannon is one of the most amazing elected officials.
Yes, here in Georgia. And her being on the show and discussing her plight as, a queer woman and a woman of color and a millennial in this space and, being dragged for the audacity, right? To
knocking on the door.
Hold Governor Kemp accountable. She wanted to look him in his eye as he was signing something, which is taking away our voting rights, taking away the rights of Black people. And it was a Black woman who said, listen, somebody got to do something about this, and stepped up. And just hearing that from Park Cannon and her still saying, I was dragged away the way I was, but that's not going to stop me from continuing this fight. Like, I still got things to do. Like, they're like, I'm holding the seat, but I got things to do.
Park is absolutely amazing. Park Cannon and Representative Park Cannon here in Georgia, and Representative Renita Shannon. Renita is closer to my, is around my age.
She was on the show too.
Renita is another phenomenal. Both of these women. So one of the things I think folks don't understand too is like a lot of times we have these amazing individuals, and maybe they're like Renita and Park have each other, and they have a little coalition around them. We have some folks who unfortunately are in some of these state houses around the country who don't have anyone, and it's just them, but they're holding that line. But one of the things I thought was just so amazing in this past, I don't know if it's the 2019 or I think it was the 2019 cycle, Renita there was nothing that really could be done around the abortion ban. All they could do, we don't have the filibuster here in Georgia. Renita just refused to yield the weld, and it literally had to be removed from the weld. Like, she just refused. Like, that was the only thing she could think to do at that time. State of Georgia was trying to pass a 6-week abortion ban, which has since been struck down. And that drew ire even from within her own party. Right. Even within her own caucus, she got admonished behind closed doors. But that resonated with the grassroots. That resonated with folks. Park also kind of got slapped on the wrist for something that she tried to do. Same thing, like in that moment. Like they are always there and present. Representative B. Nguyen is another one. B. Nguyen is the first Vietnamese American woman first Vietnamese American to be elected in the Georgia State House, possibly the state Senate as well. But she's also now running for Secretary of State. And so B's another one who has like made those bold stands to really challenge and push. And B took this past year. So in 2020, B took a lot of, when they was doing those sham hearings and stuff with Giuliani, she was ripping them to shreds. And so her, Park, Renita, all of them have received death threats at various points in times. Like, they have literally had their lives, put in jeopardy, but they are, because this is what they signed up to do, they are committed. And so we see these beautiful, bold women, folks, people who are out there doing this work. We have to have their backs, right? We have to show up and support them. You have like London Lamar in Tennessee. I'm blanking on a sister's name in South Carolina who's now running for governor. I mean, she also is another person who gave a really bold, one of her bold speeches was on access to abortion when South Carolina was trying to ban abortion for all instances except for rape or incest, or they might not have even been trying to have an exclusion, because there's sometimes when they're trying to not even give exclusions for rape and incest either. And so there are all these amazing fighters across the board in elected positions who need that support. You have organizations like Local Progress, which work with folks at the local level to support local elected officials who are progressive. You have the State Innovation Exchange, which works with progressive lawmakers as well. So there are entities out there that are also trying to give support. But we, the people, it's not enough that we voted and we elected, the right person. We still got to be there, whether it's accountability to make sure they're doing what they're supposed to be, or showing up when they're there alone, holding that line that we demand of them. So those are things that we got to build into our process of engagement as well.
Yes. And we've come to the end of the show, but that's a great point. Listen, everybody in this space, it doesn't matter. We may disagree with them. We may agree with them. We may have to cut you off because as Ben says, everybody who is kinfolk and kinfolk, I always try to get that right. Even in these spaces, people who represent the same thing. Sometimes we have to push those bad seeds out of the way, not to just shut the whole progressive movement or whatever movement that is beneficial to us down, but just to get that out of the way so we can continue this train, because we got somewhere to be, we got somewhere to go, and I got somewhere to be, I got somewhere to go, I got to get to my job. So we are coming at the end of the show. I really want to play when Nina Turner was last on here. So Bubba has left the building, but right after this, once we sign out, we're going to be playing the clip of when Nina Turner was on the show. So if you guys want to stick around just to watch our conversation with her and how we were picking her brain a little bit on what her plans were, and I'm pretty sure what her plans still are for her area, for her state, and for her people. So stay tuned. And before we leave, Noah, tell the people how they can get up with you.
You can find me on Twitters or Instagrams at The Way with Anoa, The Way with ANOA, or you can catch my writing at news1.com. And I have some other stuff coming from Miss Magazine and other outlets as well. So just, follow me online. I'm there. I engage. Be nice.
She does engage. She does engage. And Dr. Carl Mack, tell the people how they can get up with you.
at any local golf course in my area. You'll find me.
Do you even have social media? Like, I never asked you this. Do you have social media?
Right here with you, like it or not.
Right. Well, you can find him right here on Like It or Not, definitely being our cheerleader and being part of the conversation. You guys stay tuned for our clip or a little bit of our interview with Senator Nina Turner. I hope that you guys enjoy your day. It's Wednesday. We made it to midweek. All right. We only got 2 more days of this week. I'm about to hit the job. I hope that you guys enjoy the rest of your day and be right here tomorrow for more Like It or Not. See you guys. What lets you keep going, especially as a Black woman in these spaces, because that is something enough to tear you down.
It is. And thank you for that question, Rebecca. And I do want to recommend a book. Can I pause and recommend a book, The Radical King, written by the one and only Dr. Cornel West. And also people should follow Dr. Bernice King. She sets it straight on Twitter, baby. She lays it out for folks if they really listening about what her mother and her father stood for. Yeah, but you're right. That is the king that they created. What keeps me going is the spirit of our ancestors. What keeps me going are people like my grandmother, who is not as famous as a Fannie Lou Hamer, but for me was my everything. 3rd grade education, born in 1915, had what we call mother wit. And she would always say to me, baby, you need to be the best. And if you can't be the best, be next to the best, be so close to the best, nobody could tell the difference. She did not let the fact that she was robbed. And what do I mean by that? A Black woman born in 1915, dare I say more, she was robbed, but she had a kind of pride and pushed her 7 grandchildren to try to have more than what she was able to have because she was born. You know, James Baldwin has a quote, you know, you were born, basically you treated the way you treated because you were born where you were born for no other reason. I ain't quoting it verbatim, but it's in The Fire Next Time, his book, because you were Black. And so we have to deal with white supremacy. We have to deal with systemic racism. We have to deal with anti-Blackness. We got to deal with anti-Semitism. We got to deal with homophobia. It's a whole bunch of stuff that we have to deal with in these United States of America. But make no mistake, the foundation of all of those isms is anti-Blackness and what was done to our indigenous sisters and brothers. And until we have some truth and reconciliation in these United States of America, we're going to have to repeat. We're going to have to repeat the lesson over and over again. January 6th was just a manifestation of unfinished business in this country. So I'm running, you know, and then Sister Rebecca, what I am a praying woman. God knows I pray, I meditate, you know, I am a preacher's kid. And those are the kinds of things that I lean on in my moments of pain and feeling very overwhelmed. Because again, I'm fighting for justice. It doesn't make me perfect. It doesn't make me infallible. But to have people come at me the way that they do, it's not enough just to disagree with my position. You want to just all out destroy me or destroy our movement.
I could really use a change of scenery. Yeah, everybody smoking all the greenery. Yeah, close the match 'cause they were handed down to me. But I'm still fly, I know. I'm still fly, let's go. It could all be worse, I could be a hater like you. It could all be worse. Pills to make the man, but that poison's gonna kill you. From the inside out. So right now, say it with your chest now, say it with your chest now. I'm young, I'm free, can't nobody take me here and now. It's my time to run it out. It's my time to ride it. I'm young, I'm free, can't nobody take me here and now. It's my time to run it out. It's my time to ride it out. It's your time. Cheers to all the haters, 'cause you proved to me that rising to the top was my destiny. And you can see whatever from behind me, but I'm still fly, I know. I'm still fly, let's go. It could all be worse, I could be a hater like you. It could all be worse. Clothes to make the man, but that poison's gonna kill you. just now. Say it with your chest now. I'm young, I'm free. Can't nobody take me here and now. It's my time to run it out. It's my time, it's my time, it's my time to ride it. I'm young, I'm free. Can't nobody take me here and now. It's my time to run it out. It's my time, it's my time, it's my time to ride it out. It's your time, oh. If you're on the bus, say yeah. Yeah. If you're on the train, say yeah. Yeah. If you gotta walk, say yeah. Yeah.